This class will be concerned with systems and business re-engineering. Now, to start, organisations are seen as a system. They're seen as systems. All operations and activities within the organisation works towards a common goal. So we see companies as systems. They're composed of individual components or parts, and all of the parts contribute to the well-being of the whole system, of the whole organisation. So organisations are seen as a system. Organisations exist in societies. They don't exist separate from other organisations or from people or from what's happening in society in general. They exist within societies. And there are major risks and uncertainty prevailing in societies. Political upheaval, problems about the economy, changes in technology, changes in the rate of innovation, problems in the labour market. There are many risks and uncertainties that face organisations within societies. So the need for effective decision making is increasingly important. It's imperative that management are able to make good decisions to steer the organisation through the various problems. And organisations are constantly evolving. They're constantly changing. They're adopting new practices, adopting them and adapting them. Adopting them, taking them into the organisation, and adapting them by making them suitable for what they want. So they're taking in new practices all the time. They're looking at new technologies, new ways of doing things. So organisations are evolving and introducing new strategies to meet the needs and the demands of the stakeholders. The organisation must meet the requirements of the stakeholders. The stakeholders are ultimately the people who are particularly interested in the business. They range from the shareholders, the managers, the employees, the suppliers of raw materials, the government, because the company pays taxes and employs workers, local government, because they also contribute to the local communities and pay revenues to the local governments, and to the wider public by providing products and services that the customers want. Now, systems as planned organisational change. Well, organisational change may refer to the introduction of information systems, IS, within organisations. So we're here talking about the introduction of information systems, and these systems can change the way organisations conduct activities. So organisational change may refer to the introduction of information systems. As people evolve through various life cycles, so do organisations. Organisations need to change and modify strategies to continue growing as a business. So just the same as organic substances, just the same as life forms change, and we amend our behaviour and we adapt to the environment, so also organisations must change and continually adapt to its environment. So leaders and managers are responsible for introducing systems as well as monitoring and looking after external influences. So the leaders and managers of the business must constantly look out for appropriate information systems, ways of working, that meet the requirements of the customer and do so efficiently and in a way that enables the organisation to survive. Now, systems as planned organisational change. An organisation builds new information systems, IS information systems. The organisation builds new information systems in order to introduce change to the normal operations that take place within the workplace. So the organisation, try to see the organisation as running smoothly. But there are external pressures, changes in customer requirements, changes in taste, perhaps competition from abroad. Whatever it is, there are external, perhaps, pressures on the organisation. So the managers will introduce information systems on top of the existing systems and ease them in, smooth them in, so as to amend the organisation, amend its working practices to meet the external requirements. So managers are constantly looking for ways to improve efficiency, introduce new products, to innovate, to change, but at the same time keep the organisation running. Keep it running whilst it's introducing the change. It doesn't stop the organisation, introduce the change and restart. It does it while the organisation is still running. The introduction of new information systems is much more than installing hardware and software. It also involves factors such as changes in jobs, skills, management and organisational restructuring. So information systems is not just looking at computers and the flow of data around computer networks, looking at software and so on. It's changing the culture of the organisation. It's getting managers and workers to be familiar with the requirements of the system and to work with the system. So it's quite a fundamental change in the organisation. IS promotes various degrees of change, ranging from incremental to far-reaching. So the introduction of an information system could be introducing small, continuous changes in working practices. The information system requires that certain activities take place at certain times, and there are certain budgets allocated to the completion of the task, etc. So these are small incremental changes. Or indeed, the information system could be quite radical and recommend, when it's installed, that for efficiency the organisation requires radical overhaul and that departments should be moved, changed, updated or whatever. So information systems could be incremental or quite far-reaching. There are 4 types of organisational change influenced by informational technology. Here we've got a diagram with the returns on the horizontal axis and risk on the vertical axis. And you'll see that near to the origin, where the axes cross, we have automation, which is low risk and low return, followed by rationalisation, then ReEngineering, and finally the high risk and the high return is a paradigm shift. Now we're going to go through each of these in the remainder of this session, so we'll talk about each of these in turn. And we'll start with automation, the one closest to the axis. This is low risk and low return. It's the most common form of change that takes place in an organisation. Organisations don't like to take a lot of risk if it can be avoided. So they tend to go for small change and perhaps smaller returns. But the changes are easy to implement, easy to bring about. Organisations introduce new programs, software, hardware, to ensure employees perform their task efficiently and effectively. Well, it could be, as I said, quite small changes, perhaps the introduction of Microsoft Office. Perhaps they weren't using computers effectively before, or perhaps capturing information on a database or on a spreadsheet and enabling them to work in a small network on a spreadsheet, which would facilitate productivity. These are small changes, and they're quite low risk, but they can lead to efficiencies. These particular information systems assist in helping employees complete tasks, and it also means that the employees must be up to date with computer skills and must be trained appropriately. Automation is perceived to have the lowest risk and also the lowest return, as the diagram we had earlier suggested. The main aim of automation is to introduce programs that allow for increased effectiveness and efficiency, such as systems in place to accurately calculate employees' pay, building registers, recording stock and reordering facilities, and so it's the introduction of computerization where appropriate. The organisation must first look at the areas of its business where computerization and information systems would be most appropriate. Computerization may not be appropriate in many areas where decisions are required and it takes a human to make the decision. So it falls to management to make some decisions, but computers can do a lot of the heavy lifting. Computers can process the data and show trends and enable the management to see what's happening more effectively. Automation offers a faster way of doing things. Automation is least risky when within the organizations, because the information system is in place to increase efficiency. So automation is less risky. It's there to increase efficiency. It's there to help the managers. But as I said earlier, it's not applicable in all areas. Sometimes entrepreneurial decision making is required, or managerial decision making is required, and the computers can't make decisions. They can just process the data and tell us what the trends are, what the average is, or what the usage is, or what the pay bill is at the end of the month, whatever. It can process data. That in itself is quite a big thing, but the computers obviously can't make decisions. That was our diagram earlier, if you remember, and we've now dealt with the automation section, the very low risk, just automating processes where possible, introducing computers to process data, for example. Now we want to move to rationalisation. Automation identifies the need for information system to be adopted. However, rationalisation is the procedure which reveals bottlenecks and inefficiencies within an organisation. So rationalisation is looking at where the organisation is coming up against problems. Problems, for example, bottlenecks in production, too many components waiting to use the same machine. Looking at inefficiencies, where the flow of production or the flow of paperwork around the office is being held up and something needs to be done about it. Some new way of doing the work is required. The second stage involves streamlining of procedures and identifying barriers that impact on the organization's efficiency. So it's for the management to look at procedures, look at what's causing the problems, identifying the problems, the barriers, and then trying to alleviate the barriers, making sure that production runs smoothly throughout the organization. There are no hold-ups, there's no bottlenecks, and that there is no inefficiencies. And this can apply in the office, as I said earlier, the same as on the workshop floor. So it's looking at ways of solving those inefficiencies. Rationalisation is identified as providing higher risks but also higher returns on the investment for the organisation. Higher risk because it may involve the purchase of a new machine or the purchase of new computer terminals or networks. So it may involve more investment, but it'll also perhaps yield a higher return because now the organisation is running more effectively. It's running smoother. Rationalisation enables an organisation to identify and examine its standard operating procedures and eliminate inefficiencies so that operating procedures are more efficient. The whole process of rationalisation is going out to look for areas where there are inefficiencies. The inefficiencies may be in the design of the company. Where are different functions located? It may be that one particular process, which comes before the next one, is located in the wrong area and it has to be transported to the next function. Well, that's inefficient. And it's particularly inefficient if a company runs different plants in different geographic locations. So perhaps at the end of one process, the goods have to be put onto a lorry and moved to a different plant for the second process. Well, presumably it would be much better if the whole processing could run smoothly within the single plant. So rationalisation is looking for ways of cutting out inefficiencies, cutting out unnecessary steps. Now the next one along the line is ReEngineering. You can see here that the return is getting higher, but the risk is getting higher as well. Unlike automation and rationalisation, business process reengineering, BPR, is a radical change which entails an organisation's restructuring. So this is an area where there is fundamental restructuring of the business. It requires IT integration which analyse, simplify and redesign business processes to achieve an efficient and effective workforce. Now, the introduction of good computer systems means that bottlenecks can be identified, and perhaps the process of rationalisation doesn't go far enough. It solves one problem, but there are many problems. Perhaps the business had been set up many years earlier, and now the market has changed so significantly that the premises are not suitable. The design of the company is not suitable. The layout is not suitable. And tinkering with it in terms of rationalisation is not going to solve all the problems. It'll make an improvement, but perhaps it needs a more fundamental shake-up, which means business process engineering is required. It looks at the whole organisation. It looks at the outcome of the figures collected by the information system. It looks at the figures, it looks at the trends, it looks at the bottlenecks, and then makes a decision as to whether to redesign the business, redesign the layout, the plant, the capital. The whole structure is looked at. The principles of business process engineering is to improve costs, speed, quality of products and services, and effectively utilise technical resources. So it's quite a fundamental back to basics approach, looking at the organisation, looking at what's required and trying to solve that problem by a new design, by going right back to fundamentals. So business process engineering introduces information systems that reorganize workflow, cut out waste, repetitive and paper-intensive tasks. So it's radical, it's new, It may be within the same organization, the same premises in the same organization. It may look at the capital used within the business and consider it to be appropriate. Just the processes itself need to be looked at. Perhaps there are areas where mistakes can be made. Paperwork is passed from one person to the next and the paperwork gets lost, or the information is wrongly recorded, or perhaps some machines could be automated, and so on. So it's looking at areas where improvements to the workflow can be made. Cutting out waste, cutting out wasted time, wasted materials, improving the workflow. Business process re-engineering, although it's a healthy process for organizations, it does cause major disruptions and negativity amongst employees. It could, for example, cause downsizing and layoffs of workers. The company may be judged as being too big. There are unnecessary steps, or perhaps some of the process could be automated, which means that employees would be made redundant. So it may cause problems about motivation for the workforce, or it may upset the workforce. And that's an issue that the management will have to look at and consider. But the idea is to streamline the organization in a way that it becomes lean and efficient. It's a very costly process, and re-engineering is perceived to be highly risky, but also offers many rewards and returns to the investment if it's done properly. It is costly. Reorganizing the business is a costly business. It's moving capital around, looking at departments, integrating departments, changing the layout of the business, introducing new systems. That's all costly and has ripple effects. The employees have to be trained. They have to be acculturated into how the processes work. It becomes a part of their working life. So it is costly and it's risky as well. If anything happens on the way and mistakes have been made, there is a risk. But if it's done correctly, then the business would become, as I said earlier, would become lean and efficient and more profitable. Davenport and Short identify 5 steps in the process for effective business process re-engineering. The 5 steps are: develop a business vision and process objective. So make sure that the business knows where it wants to be, knows the final stage, knows what it wants, where it wants to go, and what's the objective of the whole process. The objective is to streamline the business, become more efficient. So make sure that there is clarity about the vision of the business, where the business wants to be, and how it's going to get there. What are the process objectives? Look at the particular processes that need to be redesigned. Perhaps not all of them need to be redesigned. Perhaps just part of the business needs to be dealt with. Or maybe the whole business needs to be looked at, but maybe it's just one department needs to be redesigned. So identify the processes that need to be redesigned. And understand and measure the existing processes. Make sure that the existing processes are inefficient before any re-engineering is done, because if the existing processes are already efficient, then there's no need to go any further. So make sure that there are accurate measures of efficiency and effectiveness within departments. Look at the existing processes critically and make sure that the whole exercise can generate efficiencies. If the existing processes are already efficient, leave it alone. There's no need for business process re-engineering. The existing business is efficient. So that can only be determined if accurate measures have been taken. Then identify the tools that are necessary for the business process of re-engineering. How will it be implemented? What machines are required? How will the machines be integrated into wider systems? Is it possible to computer control the systems and perhaps get greater efficiency through that control? Can the systems be automated? Is there software and hardware available to control the systems? How much will it cost? What's the maintenance on the system? If it breaks down, what's the fallback position? So identify the IT tools that are necessary. And design and build a prototype of the new process. Don't just rush in to radically overhaul a department. Make sure that there is some sort of prototyping of what's going to happen and that it will work smoothly. Phase it in perhaps and check each part as it's phased in. Or try to see the system working in a different company if possible. So phase it in. The last one is paradigm shift. Now a paradigm shift is high risk and high return. A paradigm shift is the most risky change within the model. This change has major consequences if inappropriately carried out. So a paradigm shift is really a big radical change in the organization, and hence it's the most risky. Paradigm shift is when an organization uses its information system to change the nature of their business and restructure to offer new products and services. So it's a fundamental change in the business. It's using the information system to radically change the business. It's a paradigm shift. It's changing the way work is carried out. It's changing the processes within the business. It could be even changing the products and the services that are offered. So it's very risky. It's a big radical change in the business. The internet is one of the main methods used by organizations such as e-commerce. The internet is constantly evolving and changing, and every so often there is a radical change in the way the internet works. We've seen it with the introduction of touchscreens. We've seen it with the introduction of many of the facilities of HTML5. So there are many radical changes that happen within the internet, and that's just an example of a wide process, a process that in a sense no one owns, but a wide process where radical change can sweep over the whole organization. If you can imagine the internet as an organization, the whole process is changed by the introduction of new ways, touch screens, mobile networking, as I said, HTML5, and so on. So paradigm shift is big radical change. It's a radical reconceptualization of the organization's business model. This stage requires major changes to methodologies, practices, and planning. It looks at the organization, it looks what it does, it figures out new ways of doing it, and this permeates the whole organization from the office to the shop floor, back up in through the office. So it's a fundamental change, which can lead to a change in the product or the service that's offered also. For example, there's a growing demand for delivery of higher education through online resources. And this is a paradigm shift for education. The education sector is faced with many challenges and requires a change to their business model to accommodate student needs. Students need to work, they need to live, they can't afford big student fees perhaps, and the cost of not working for 3 or 4 years. So if education is going to engage those students, education will need new models, similar to the one that we're developing here, similar to the one you're using currently with us. Now, the impact of information systems in business. Well, changes and advances in technology has posed challenges and opportunities for organizations. So the impact of information systems in business is that it has changed business. It has brought about advances in technology and the application of technology, and that has enabled not just challenges for staff to learn new techniques and new processes, but also looking at the opportunities for the organization, opportunities to be more efficient and to cut costs and to increase delivery times and to give a better customer satisfaction at the end. And organizations have a need to adapt technology in order to stay competitive within the marketplace. It's no longer a luxury to have computer systems. It's now essential to have computer systems. The speed of computing power and the range of software techniques available means that organizations need this to make them competitive in the marketplace. Technology has replaced the need for human resources, as IT can perform tasks faster and more efficiently. Well, obviously not all human resources, because we still need people to make decisions. And it's still people who mostly deal with people. But where information is standard or standardized, then it can be processed electronically. And the means of communications have become electronic. So technology has replaced a lot of what was the more mundane human processes within the organization, communicating, passing memos to each other and leaving notes on desks and so on. That's become electronic, and it's become much more formalized, because records can be kept and can be kept more efficiently. An email will have a whole system of backup emails to show how an idea emerged and who said what and what was agreed. So it's become much more formalized, and it has changed working practices immensely. The impact of information systems in business. Well, technology has transformed information systems in business. Technology has greatly changed the information systems in business. The speed with which information is passed is much faster now. It's done much more efficiently. At the press of a return key, the information is almost immediately on the other person's desk. Information tends to be more accurate, because if there are flaws in the calculations on a spreadsheet, the spreadsheet will indicate where the flaws are. Even on a very simple scale, if someone's sending a memo and misspells a word, the chances are the word processor will make recommendations how to respell the word and how to change it. Small things, but all improves accuracy, the elimination of error and misunderstanding. Computers tend to work 24/7. They don't have holidays. They don't relax. They may get viruses and they may break down from time to time, but generally speaking, they're 24/7. So they can process a lot of information. And there's a greater complexity. They can store and operate many functions reliably. They can multitask. They can work on spreadsheets at the same time as playing a video and perhaps accessing the internet. There are many facilities to computers that individuals can't do. Normally we focus on one task at a time. When you complete the task, we move on to a separate task, a new task. Computers can do several things simultaneously. They can genuinely multitask. So this was an introduction to topics relating to systems and business re-engineering. Here are some sources that we looked at throughout this particular session, and that's all I'm going to do on this topic. I'm going to leave it at that and going to say thank you for watching.